to Other Lands Editing Podcast, where two speculative fiction writers and editors help you craft fantastical worlds by keeping an eye on exacting editing and foundational writing principles. Every 2 weeks, we bring you interviews with other writers, advice on editing and writers' craft pitfalls, and reviews of popular media to help you grow. So sit back, relax, and join Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss as we discuss all things writing and editing. Hi, welcome to Other Lands Editing. You're back for season 2 again with Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss. And today we're going to be talking about Superman 2025, the newish film from James Gunn, and a little bit contrasting it with some of Zack Snyder's DCEU stuff, but mostly focusing on why Superman as a film works so well and what about it is so well written. So, hey, Midnight, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. So I guess the first thing to start with is looking at just its narrative structure, but also how importantly and well this movie relies on setting up stakes for Superman. And I guess I should also mention, and we'll put it in the show notes, obviously this because we're really talking about the effectiveness of the writing and especially the payoff that's seated early in the movie. There's going to be spoilers. So go see the movie first and then come back if you have.
Spoilers everywhere.
Okay, spoilers gone. So now we'll talk about stakes. I guess you can say going into this movie, or at least if you started hearing the right wing manosphere, also Snyder bro reactions to the movie, that people were really upset even from the trailers because, quote, Superman looked weak. And I think that sets up a discussion once you actually see how it goes in the movie about actually creating stakes and actually creating a character who has something at stake. What are your thoughts on that, Midnight?
Yeah, I think stakes are always important. Like, we need to know that this matters in the end. And that's one of the reasons that people don't like Superman as much as, say, Batman, because they perceive that Superman doesn't have stakes and therefore he's kind of boring. But that's generally not the case. It's like we've been talking for the past 3 weeks about how Superman has weaknesses that can be exploited. He's literally not a god. There are gods in this universe. There are god characters in this universe. He is
There is
not one
literal
of them.
God, technically, in the extended DC
Yeah,
comics
if you think
canon.
about the presence in Lucifer, like there are people who are way, way above his pay grade. So it's not that he should be all powerful. It's that people want him to be all powerful or they misperceive him as all powerful and therefore think he's boring. But he's not. There are multiple things that hurt him. We all know about kryptonite. Lesser known is magic, that Tana can take him for a spin. And in this movie, we really see how powerful he is because of how much it takes to take him down.
Yeah, and part of that is with what the essentially detractors said just from the first trailers. It's like, oh, he's in the Arctic, he's bleeding. Why is Superman bleeding and looks like he's got broken ribs? He's Superman, yada yada. So they didn't have the context yet. And the context is, to be fair, they were going to hate it either way. But the context is that this opens on Clark's crashed into the Arctic trying to get to his fortress because he has to recover. And he's bleeding and he's had clear internal injuries. He can't even make it to the fortress. So he's falling out of the sky. That's how hurt he is. But when you find out what happened, is because basically Lex Luthor has been on a 3-year intense hater campaign of the millennia, putting every plan in place to weaken Superman, including, again, we said spoilers, guys, so this is your last bailout chance. He's created a clone of Superman, who in this case is Ultraman, but I wonder if he ever comes back, he might be more Bizarro version. So Clark has just lost a fight to Ultraman. He's wearing a mask, so he doesn't know it's a clone of himself at this point, neither does the audience. Who, again, also, as we revealed at the end of the movie, is been trained and has a earpiece so he can hear a bank of Lex's employees shouting out information about fight. And we've got the camera so we can see this eye in the sky. So we know you need to do move 1B instead of 1A because Lex knows every single one of Clark's most common moves and probably his less common ones because he has spent years studying Clark's every move so that once he had a clone of Clark made, it would be his brain and his strategy essentially via an earpiece feeding the clone what to do. So you've got the clone, you've got a team of engineers watching like every angle of the fight to give Lex real-time information so Lex can make the strategic decisions based on the patterns he knows about Clark's own fighting habits. And that also doesn't even mention the engineer or his little squad of mercenaries he's got, or whatever mercenary robots he's got, that have also been pounding on Superman by now at the beginning of this like fight he lost. So it took all of that to get Superman to bleed, and in the end he goes to the fortress, gets some yellow sun, and he's back to at least 85% within about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
So he's
like
still very
it took
strong.
3 years worth of planning, Lex plus a clone, a team of cult members, the engineer, some little robots. All of this is what it took to get Superman down.
For
But
about
he's not
20
out
minutes. Yeah,
for like 20
exactly.
minutes and he comes back. So, but that was
Yeah.
just step one of the plan because Lex is the ultimate planner, Mr. Type A. He's been planning for 3 years. And that's why the stakes are so high, is that but DC has really been lacking, and we've been talking about this a lot, is to have real threats, real scary villains. And the movies that I associate with being pretty good are the ones that have a strong villain or they're, side characters, right? So like the Suicide Squad doesn't have a strong central villain because it doesn't need one because they're all villains and they're just being anti-heroes. But if you think about this one versus Birds of Prey, they both have a strong villain. The problem with the DC universe prior to that is if you don't have a good Lex, then how strong is Superman really? Like, who
Yeah.
is he actually challenging? But because Lex is so smart, because Lex can come up with a whole plan, his entire aim is to kill Superman, but he's changing geopolitics so that he can get a world approval to do it. And it's scary. Like, he's a scary character in multiple ways. He is a big
Yeah.
threat.
And I think one thing is, like you mentioned, this is his first volley after 3 years of planning. It's not a plan. I mean, it is a plan, but it's a plan with like 18 nested subsections. If this plan was written out, it would read like a big, thick legal contract with subsection A. And this is the other part of my plan, because eventually part of it is basically he needs to get public sentiment to turn enough against Superman to get the federal government to treat him like a defense contractor to get permission to kill Superman. And as part of that, he also has to do military, essentially weapon selling to this country in Boravia. So eventually, when he given the clearance to kill Superman on this pretext, he's got a military ally, but he also has had the whole Boravian Jodportian conflict that Superman gets into as a pretext to get the federal government to buy in. But he makes it look like, and you think like Lois does for most of the movie, that his whole aim was a land scheme deal. He'll get half of Jar and Poor once Boravia takes it over for oil and the techno state. But no, he just really screwed with geopolitical politics and stoked this war between one country and the country it's trying to genocide so he can have fiat to kill Superman with federal approval. It's all about killing Clark. There's 18 steps and 5 side plans in his master plan, but it's all about killing Clark. And he's very good at the evil things he does. And part of it, once he at least has his hands on Clark, because the DOD lets him arrest him, and he sends him to a pocket dimension where he's holding political prisoners. Lex Luthor has his own extra dimensional Gitmo. It's very clear. And he's doing that by also finding another way to weaken Clark by finding Metamorpho to create kryptonite, because on this version in James Gunn's Earth, there isn't any natural kryptonite or kryptonite that fell from the stars left on Earth. So he has to do this extra plan. So for 3 years, he's also been looking for Metamorpho. Like he's got plans on top of plans on top of plans. And he also, like you mentioned, does not care who he has to kill to do it, which is also terrifying. If you want to
Yeah.
elaborate on his killing and how effective he is, it's being terrifying.
I want to piggyback on something else, and then we'll talk about him being effective as scary.
Totally.
So we were focusing on stakes, and this is why this is important to Clark because Lex has effectively, at some point, turned public opinion against him. So his ability to be Superman has been diminished. His ability to be a free citizen is diminished. And eventually he's tucked away in a pocket dimension. But the bigger threat is that Lex is reckless and we have the very pocket dimension that he's created that Mr. Terrific tells us is bad. It is ripping apart Metropolis first, but will eventually destroy the planet. That threat doesn't occur in the first 5 minutes. the threat escalates over the course of the narrative, of the stakes build of the course of the narrative, and we get more and more worried. How is this ever going to be pulled together? Superman's not the threat. He's not the one tearing apart Metropolis. It's legit Lex Luthor because he wants to kill him. So the stakes amp up as we go along. And it becomes more and more important that Superman continue to be strong, that he have that resilience and strength of character, and his innate desire to save everyone is going to push him to make sure that they win, even though he has insurmountable odds. And that's why I want to root for him, because he's fighting so hard against something that he didn't see coming and he couldn't have,
I
because
guess
Lex
part
is
of that
weird.
is Lex also struck gold in that the very opening is getting Clark injured enough so the engineer can track him to find the fortress for herself so they can go back later. And they do. And since they have Ultraman, who is Clark's DNA, they can get into it, yada, yada. But the point is, Lex was hopeful if he got into the fortress and the engineer is basically half nanotech and she could hack it, that he could find something to use against Clark. He didn't know he might find it. He was just super hopeful he could. And he did, because he did hit the jackpot of, for one of the only times more commonly in Superman lore, Gunn decides to flip the Laura and Jor-El are benevolent. Jor-El sent him as like a gift, blah, 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 on its head. And now it's, oh, you were sent to conquer and make a harem, usual literal term. And he's able to get that message. And then at the key moment, use it and broadcast it on essentially Tucker Carlson, national news, to get all of the world to turn on Superman, thinking he's here to conquer. And so the stakes are, yeah, Ultraman could beat Clark pretty badly. Yeah, Clark might get locked in a pocket universe where kryptonite can hurt him because Metamorpho's there. But really, the biggest stakes is that Clark, on several fronts, because Lex is so effective, does question himself, his purpose, and his mission. And so he's
Yeah,
also internally struggling. He's not just punch, 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 I might die struggle. He's struggling internally at a soul deep level. And that's also interesting to see a character struggle
yeah, yeah.
emotionally. And that's
That
definitely something we haven't seen as much in Superman media, in the films, and maybe ever really at that level.
they don't take the time to do, as you're saying, take the external conflict and turn it into an internal conflict,
No,
which is what makes it so rich. Let's move on to why Lex is a scary MFer. It's like,
totally.
this man will threaten a baby, torture a dog, and dead ass just shoot a guy who is a total stranger.
Yeah, he's spoken to
Superman talked to
Superman
this guy like
once,
once or
twice.
twice. Yeah, he gave him a falafel for free after getting saved. Like, it's just it. I
Yeah,
think
they're
I
not
don't
best
remember what it
buds.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they don't
not.
know each other that well.
Yeah. And he just, Lex Luthor, because he's trying to get Clark to talk while he's in Gitmo, essentially, it's like, I'll just torture and threaten a person you've just interacted with, not as friends with, just have interacted with once a day until you finally tell me what I want to know. And he starts with playing Russian roulette with Malik, and he only gets through the second chamber and he shoots Malik in the head. And now James Gunn pulls back, so you hear the gun and you see the shadow silhouette, because it's still technically a kids movie, so you don't get it in graphic detail. But it is chilling that not only did he just shoot a dude for leverage, essentially, that Superman has talked to once or twice at best, but he's not bothered by it. He's only upset that it maybe didn't go a couple extra rounds, because now he's got to find someone else to do it tomorrow and he didn't get the information he wanted today. His only concern is it's going to take extra time. He doesn't give a crap that Malik just got murdered. He doesn't give a crap that he's got to keep a baby hostage and will definitely kill it if Metamorpho steps out of line. He is ice cold to just get his aims, and we've seen him do horrible things effectively and
Yeah,
at a personal level. Like, it's not, oh, I'm destroying a city and buildings are collapsing. It's real intimate and real human level of violence to see someone just be flat out murdered, flat out assassinated mob style with a one bullet to the head. And it's realistic enough and something that happens in our own world enough that it chills you. We'd mentioned Birds of Prey a bit, but like with Sionis, Black Mask, his most chilling scene is humiliating a woman essentially sexually by making her strip in front of everybody in his club to her underwear, actually. But it's the fact that she has no power. He is someone who she thought he trusted because she goes to his club as a patron, and everybody else in the club is too scared to do anything but enable this. That terrifies you because you understand sexualized violence and you understand being hurt, especially if you're a woman viewer of that, but because it's something that could happen and has happened every day. Some dude runs afoul of a mob boss or gets in the middle of a shooting or whatever, and they're just dead because a bullet does it. Like, well, a bullet pulled by the trigger delivered by Lex Luthor. These are just very effective moments. And you know that not only is Lex thought everything out for 3 years and has a million contingencies and he's in control, you know that it doesn't bother him one whit to just shoot someone who barely even met Superman and he'll keep doing it. And it's chilling.
It's that they have so much power that they can be infinitely petty, and
Yes.
that there is no one that can stop that level of power. It's what grounds it from them just being like wacky hijinks. How can anyone be this evil? Is that you see them exercising power over people in ways that were recognizable to us, and it grounds the narrative. And oh yeah, that actually worries me. He threatens the baby, and that should be the moment, but we're a little distracted because it's a CGI baby.
It's cute though.
And we know that he tortures the dog, but we don't recognize it until Eve says he tortured a dog. And Jimmy is like, oh God. There's so much over the topness from Lex, but then there's also that moment, that part of him that's really threatening because of its realism. So pulling it back from cartoony violence is important for us to actually care.
And it makes him effective and it makes him feel real. I just think that, and there can be a whole 3 hour dissertation we don't have time for
Yeah,
about how
let's
currently
talk about
DC's
Lex.
villains previously have been very ineffective. And we're both thinking of obviously often Leto's version of, we'll call it the Joker,
Yeah.
and Jesse Eisenberg's version of, again, we'll call him Lex in Batman vs. Superman in a few scenes in the Justice League. But it's bad.
Yeah,
They're
they're just too
they clearly
ineffective
don't
to be the
understand
threat.
the source material. They're weirdly campy. They're not intimidating. And I'm not talking about even physical, although Eisenberg being so much smaller than Affleck or Cavill was a big problem. But I'm talking about being wacky and kind of off on their own and almost feeling like comic relief. It doesn't work if you don't even feel like the villains or anything but like
Yeah.
wacky comic relief because a
And it
hero is
actually,
only as strong as the villain.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is it actually makes Superman weaker if his Lex isn't up to par to fight with him, because I feel like Holt's Lex would wipe the floor with
Oh
that guy.
yeah.
Of like, he
Oh
like, "You're
yeah.
stupid, I'm gonna kill you," and he'll feel like he was right to do it.
He-
So, let's move on
Yeah,
along
totally.
before we talk about Lex for 3 hours.
I love
Um,
Lex. He's great. Okay, so trust the audience because I think this movie has so much to do. It's a lot of pressure. I can't imagine the pressure having to write it, even though Gunn is also head of the studio and he's been organizing their other official reboot projects, really hand by hand writing the episodes of Peacemaker and the Monster Commando stuff. But it's hard because DC and Warner Brothers really did a terrible job for a decade on their movies and their branding almost universally. And no one wanted to see this. And no one's like, I can't wait to see the third version of Superman in 19 years. No one was super excited. So there's that pressure already of audience expectation. But then you've got to reestablish this world. You've got to reset up what the dynamics are and what your version of the character is going to be 13 years after Man of Steel had a very definitive take on that version of Superman. I still have feelings. We'll talk about that a bit more on that. But you've got so much world building in this context of this is my world. This is my version of Superman. Here's where we are. And he has to get off the ground running. And I think they also definitely felt like from DC, there was encouragement to keep this movie brisker for a comic book movie because they have started to, like, obviously the Snyder Cut's 4 hours, but a lot of the Marvel movies have crept into 2.5 hour territory lately. And I feel like there was definitely this, you've got to do this, but it has to be 2 hours. You got to get, people don't avoid the theater just because it's too long to even sit through. So he's got all these challenges that Gunn is meeting, and he does a lot of really good things and starts with trusting the audience, honestly, because he trusts how to use time efficiently, how to double load scenes and double load what he's doing for multiple purposes at once to keep it character, theme, mission statement of the film, honestly, plot going, and also not to waste your time because he doesn't start with, here's the origin story in case you lived under a rock and don't know who Superman is, I guess, or other
yeah,
things where he could start at the wrong place. The beginning of the film is really smartly done for not wasting time.
yeah. So, do you want to talk about the title card, and then I'll talk about what we mean by double loading scenes?
Yeah, because I think the title card is the first example of how to be parsimonious with time, but then how the double load scenes is a different aspect of that that's super important. Basically, again, this is a slightly different version of Superman world than we've seen in other theatrical films. Usually, Superman's the first guy on the scene. It's kind of like, oh, we start realizing there are weird gods and aliens and stuff out there because Superman becomes famous in Metropolis. This is not that story. Essentially, metahumans, individuals with abilities for various reasons, have been out to the public, and some of them have been superheroes or aides or vigilantes or whatever, warriors for 300 years. So the way James Gunn gets us encapsulated, and this is our vampires are a different trope. Superman is different for Gunn because he's not the only superhero on the block, far from. So to contextualize that for us so we know where we're going, he flashes up a title card that I think is 5 sentences, at most six. And it's like 300 years ago, metahumans made themselves known to the world. 30 years ago, the most powerful metahuman crashed to the planet. 3 years ago, Superman went public in Metropolis. 3 weeks ago, he interjected himself into Moravian conflict and took blowback for interacting into geopolitical politics. 3 minutes ago, he just lost his first fight. Those are the 5 sentences on the title card. You read it. It takes about 2 minutes because you have to have time to read and digest. Boom. Superman crashes into the Arctic on his way because he's too hurt to hit the fortress. Whistles for crypto. We're off to the races. But he trusted the audience enough to contextualize this version of Metropolis and this version of DC's heroes and how they play out to each other and how the world in general knows about heroes and people with powers. And he tells you this with those 5 sentences, and then he trusts you to understand that. And we're in medias race, and the movie's starting. Keep up. And I am sure it took him so many drafts. I'd be surprised if it took less than 15 drafts to get that title card to be 5 or 6 sentences and be that clear and that understandable. I am positive it had to go through so many iterations because that title card and those 5 or 6 sentences does yeoman service of tons of world building without it bogging down anything or being confusing. And I would say that I think part of that is this anaphora, this repetition of three
Yeah.
and numbers, because it is a lot of information, but because you've got 300 years, 30 years, and it's also a countdown because time gets shorter. Your mind is grasping it because it's clinging onto those numbers for context. It's brilliant. But I like to say
Yep.
that because setting up your world building, setting up the introduction of your story is very hard, and it often takes not just multiple drafts, because you really, what you start and set up in the first part, you don't understand how it pays off till you finish out your first draft or two of where it gets seeded and paid off in the final arc and the climax and denouement. But also, it just takes a lot to build the world without bogging people down in info dumping. It's a hard skill, and you're not going to get it on even the second or third draft. So I can just tell by the way this works so well and does so much work so fast. But clearly, that Gunn had a lot of feedback. He had someone else or two he trusted as critique partners, and he got it down over many iterations to be this clear. Because in contrast, the joke is again, we rewatched, or I made Midnight watch. I'm a bad wife. The Snyderverse version of Justice League for the only time for her and me ever again, actually last night, and it's about 4 hours long. Now it was released directly to streaming to Max, but it's 4 hours long. So she joked, what would you say if it was Zack Snyder doing the same thing to set up his world with metahumans had been out for 300 years? It wouldn't have been a
Well, you
title
would have
card, would
started
it?
in ancient Egypt and then moved to another time and then to another time. And then we would skip over Wonder Woman for some reason. And then we would go over to something else and it would fully take half an hour. And I say this because I have watched Man of Steel twice now, thanks to you. And the first 24 minutes, we're
Yeah,
not
it's at
even
least
on
25
Earth.
minutes.
He hasn't even met the Kents yet. Of the like everyone by the time Man of Steel came out knows who Superman is, and we really know about superheroes now. And what this title card does for us is it allows us to just drop into the comic books world as is, because in comic books world, it's not like you're suddenly just the first superhero that ever existed unless you're starting a new title from a new thing. Usually you're already coming into a world that has been lived in. And, there's other stuff happening. But on screen, they keep trying to do it as Superman was the first person who ever had powers ever, but it turns out to be not the case, which means you have already betrayed your own world building. So this is a smart thing for him to do because he wants to introduce a lot of things at once. And I didn't realize when I watched the movie, the 2025 movie the first time that he was going to reuse all these characters that we get to see. He's not going to waste a damn thing. We're going to see all these people again, and we even get Peacemaker getting interviewed by Tucker Carlson and saying whatever he wants to say that he read on the internet. So it gives us a world to work with already that the movie going public understands there are people with powers out there. The in-world universe understands that there are people with powers out there,
And
and it gets it over really quick.
yeah, and I'll let you talk about double loading in 1 second, but I will say that I understand that because we've had such a cultural zeitgeist in the last 30 years of movies and also CW, especially doing DC superhero shows, that there's a different level of cultural awareness of just what comic books are, what some of the lore is, what you can get away with, and that had to be built by a cultural zeitgeist over 3 decades. But I
Yeah,
like and respect that Gunn knows that we all know that because we have eyeballs and have lived on America for the last mostly America. I mean, it's a global audience, but you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
been such a saturation of superhero media for at least 2 decades that we know we're gonna get it. And he trusts the audience to be like, okay, here's how
yeah,
my specific superhero universe functions and is different. Let's go. He trusts you to get it and to be able to make those distinctions.
yeah. So we're going to go from there to something we talked about double loading scenes. You could even triple load if you have
Oh
to.
yeah, if you're
The
good enough.
point is that every scene has to carry its weight. This goes from novels to movies to TV shows. It should. You have
It
more
should.
time to burn in different formats, but the reality is that if you have a fight scene, it can't just be a fight scene. If you have a sex scene, it's not just a sex scene, unless you want to, you know, waste our time.
Maybe if you're
Um,
more doing like erotic romance or like flat out
yeah.
erotica, but that's a different genre with different expectations in general.
So,
Even a
for
sex scene has to
example,
do stuff.
in this movie, all of the moments between Clark and Lois, except maybe for the kiss at the end, although that one's payoff too, so it's not
That's
just
payoff.
anything. All of the Clark and moments, Lois moments, do double duty. They don't just have them work on their relationship, they have them show their relationship, build their character, and in some cases, deliver world building lore and the theme of the movie. So in the interview scene, we have straight up exposition as they have the question and answer format where Lois stands in to give us a sense of what other people are saying about this geopolitical conflict. And he is giving character as he's answering. This is how he sees things. But then at the same time, we get the dynamic of their relationship where she's very pragmatic and realistic and he is very idealistic and
A bit
not,
naive, to
yeah.
be honest. Like hopeful naive, but doing the best things with the best of intentions, but naive about the greater ramifications and complications. And she's trying to point that out. As she says later, she's a born cynic.
Yeah, and then later when she says I'm a bored cynic, that's another moment where we're having multiple things. You've mentioned before you need to sometimes let the narrative breathe and have those character moments. This is one of those moments, but it's not just one of those moments. So it's both touching back on their relationship, their first conversation after the fight. She's explaining to us that she's the cynic, he's the hopeful one, and it kind of gives us the thesis for the movie of hope
Oh, it
can be
does.
punk. It can be an act of resistance to just be hopeful and try to do your best every day. And that seeds something for when he talks again with his dad about things. And from his talk with his dad, that goes into the final emotional through line where he explains to Lex that he is a person too, and he is just trying to do better every day. So all of these little character moments are not just doing that thing, they're also doing the other things. If we take this to your writing and saying, why are your sex scenes boring? It might be people are expecting something that is character driven and then suddenly it could be anyone in the scene.
Or it's incrementally building stages of relationship and stages of at least characters admitting to themselves the depths of their feelings. But you
Yeah,
basically relegated it to more, I just needed to change locations or positions, and it's a new sex scene, and that didn't have the emotional resonance or character development along with it. And you were mentioning in fight scenes, because we also rewatch Birds of Prey, but how if a fight scene is really needed and really well done and really tailored to the character, then you understand it in context of also building the character.
You see learn so much about the characters when they fight, and they all have their different ways because it is superhero stuff. They all have their own ways of engaging in a fight, and in writing, you change how you write the perspective based off of who's in charge of that scene. I know a lot of people will use first person, but if you're doing a lot of fantasy, it may just be a close third, in which case whose head you're in is gonna be how they're observing what's going on, who do I need to protect, what do I need to do? And you take that into the movies, and then you have okay, you have Harley Quinn doing whatever the heck she is doing in that prison scene where the rain is coming down and she just uses whatever's around her. It's insane. Or when in this movie we have Mr. Terrific, in one visual, you see his incredible competence and efficiency as he goes through with his little T spheres. And it's crazy. And these are the most entertaining fight scenes to me because you're seeing the character. And in that case, you're actually seeing it through Lois's eyes.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
the
doing 2
insane
things
part.
there.
Is
Yeah,
in a
go ahead.
movie about Superman, the best fight scene hands down is Mr. Terrific's fight scene, and that is definitely a scene that is triple loaded at I mean, at minimum, because we don't really know who Terrific is. I only knew him vaguely because I knew he's a second or third tier character in later seasons of Arrow, CW version, but just that he existed and he did computer stuff, I guess. But so most people don't even have that much. They don't know who he is. So Gunn obviously knows that because he and Lois go to Lex's base essentially to find where Clark has disappeared to. And even when he lands with her from his ship, people are like, it's just the smart one from the Justice Gang. Don't have to worry about it. And it's like famous last words because then he puts Lois in an isolated force field sphere. And then it's from her perspective. She watches as he and his little T-Spear robot-y things decimate like 40 trained like mercenary soldiers, and it's not even a sweat. And it's you character for him so you know like exactly what kind of a threat the third smartest man in the DCU is. It's got emotional resonance because we're reacting like Lois is. She's our window character, and we're all going, "What is happening?" And then it's also comic relief because it's violence, but it's played to one of those James Gunn musical cues that's really funny and you don't expect an offbeat. But it's also payoff because that person at the beginning said, it's just the smart one. He can't hurt us. It's not like he's a lantern or whatever. And you're like, oh no, do not make Mr. Terrific mad. But it does 4 or 5 of these things and with amazingly good camera work too, because it's all mostly a one take or feels like one. So you're getting different swirling angles, which are clear, but you're just getting this whole thing. And for the whole time, Mr. Terrific isn't bothered by any of this. He's surrounded by 40 people and he and his technology are just power walking through it like he's on a model catwalk. He's just unbothered. And it tells you so much about him, a character none of us really know, in about 5 minutes. And you stop, and when the shield goes off, and Lois is sitting there gobsmacked with her mouth hanging open, you're doing the same thing in your chair, going, what just happened here? But again, it's a scene that does 3 or 4 things, and it really tells you so much about who Terrific is, how he interacts with his technology, and how even if he's just a human with tech, he's no one to mess with and to really establish his street cred. And that scene does all of that by having a tailored fight scene to him and what he does.
Yeah, and you could say that about any of the characters as they fight in this, like any of them, of Guy
Oh
Gardner
yeah.
flipping off the tanks as he does
Oh
his
yeah.
girl screaming and going goblin mode. And then you have Clark specifically, how he fights. He is very aware of his surroundings. His biggest concern is people around him getting hurt. He
Including the
saves a
kaiju.
woman. He does aftercare and says, calm down, take a breath, it's going to be okay. He saves a kid, he saves a squirrel, he wants the kaiju to live. You see him in the fight scene. It's not just action, action, action. Let's introduce the Justice Gang. It's action, action, Justice Gang. Let's learn more about Clark.
And the kaiju fight's really important too because it sets a contrast between essentially the heroing styles, term maybe used loosely with the Justice Gang, of the first time we see them in action with the kaiju. Clark's trying to relocate it to another area because it's just an animal essentially, and it's a sweet motive, but it's obviously slowing him up in his ability to get it out of there. But the Justice Gang's approach is to basically just murder it. So like they try by taking out its eyes, and Guy makes a drilling machine into its eyes, and it's horrifying. And eventually, Guy like, oh no, Mr. Terrific gets it to swallow something, so it blows up an internal organ and just die. It's horrific, and you go, oh, the Justice Gang solve problems, but maybe they're not doing it in the best, most ethical way, and it's just setting up
Yeah, they don't
who
work
Clark
together
is
as a
versus
team really well.
who they are. Yeah, it's a very important fight scene, both to contrast their ethoses, but also, yeah, even as a team, the three of them kind of bicker and don't have each other's back very well either.
Yeah.
So if in 3 months you told us the Justice Gang broke up, you'd be like, yeah, I saw that coming, not surprised.
It was Guy's fault, probably.
So what about when you're talking about scenes where you have that scene in sequel that like rests those character beats? I also think we mentioned like Clark and his dad, Jonathan Kent. Like there are some scenes towards the last third of the movie that are really important father-son scenes that also do multiple things to
The
do that.
father-son scene that I mentioned was in connection to how it drives his conversation with Lex later. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's good to have that beat of we're proud of you, we still love you. Essentially, you make your own choices. But the way they do it, I don't know, they just take a beat to establish that this version of Jonathan's not putting expectations on Clark and being didactic to him, but also mixes the this is what he's going to reflect in his speech to Lex when he gets his confidence back. And also, it starts with taking that beat of starting with just Clark sat on a bench. He's like, well, I went back to that burrito place we like. And it's weird, but it's nice that it starts with them relating to each other as just Clark and John, father and son. What's changed in Kansas since you've been gone? It gives it that extra human beat of this is really just him and this is really just his family. So it does that third
Yeah.
thing too to humanize him, which I really appreciate.
I think we also have to mention for things that are seeded early on. Within the first scene, we see what Crypto's going to do later on. That wasn't just for the lulz of Crypto jumping on people and shaking them around is like you know that this is going to happen to people later. We see him playing with the T spheres earlier, and that's a seeded for what he's going to do in the later battle. So none of it is one off. It's giving us the concept, the framing for what's possible. So it all comes back. Even the message when it gets there says for the robot, this is the message from his parents. It soothes him. They're introducing the message because they're going to turn it on its head
And
of
also
like,
because like number 20 is a new robot, so she's new to the whole way
yeah,
everything works as well. Because it'd be weird if Four was just saying that and he says it every day, but Gunn's also smart enough to have that newbie character for 5 seconds so you know why you're getting explained stuff. Some writers forget to do that and you get the as you know Bob dialogue and it gets awkward, but that's not here. But
yeah, we need
yeah,
a
everything
reason
comes
to do it in
yeah.
dialogue as that's part of not wasting our time. You don't want to sit down there and just explain everything to the audience because it's boring. But if you can get it in dialogue in a relatable way, with Four, it helps because he's a robot and he's just replaying things. So when he has the new robot, he just explains things to it, and he does it at the beginning and the end. Okay, Four is a soothing. It's a soothing message. Great. But then you get other things into dialogue that are really interesting, like the Justice Gang ripping into Guy for his vow. And I don't remember the Justice Lantern vow, but there is one. It's like Darkest Night, blah, blah, blah. And so
Sounds
get
like the
both
thing about post
characterization and
office.
exposition. What were you going to say?
Like the post office, like I, no whether rain nor sleet nor snow, but that's all I know about the lanterns is like by darkest night or brightest day, and we're
Oh,
gonna be
I'll
good
look into
dudes,
it when they have
basically.
the show finally.
Yeah, they're
Um,
gonna be good dudes, basically, or whatever. And you're like, how did Guy get here? Even though he doesn't even recite his vow, you've met Guy long enough already when Lois is arguing with him in the Justice Gang hall to be like, this guy took a vow. He's a guy, he considers himself a guy of the cloth, the lantern cloth. I'm like, why did this jerk off get picked to be a lantern? It's just enough to know, okay, you got picked and you had to take a vow and be part of a brotherhood, but why you? You seem like the least likely candidate to get that ring, is what I'm saying. But you don't go into
but
it more
none
than
of
that,
these
but you know some
characters
answer
warrant
about.
full backstory explanation. We don't need at any point for them to cut away and give us a backstory for them. We have enough for what we have. Hawkgirl
Yeah,
is a college student.
she has hawk
Guy
powers
is
and she's
this
feral.
guy, and Mr. Terrific is sciency. Okay, we got it. It's got. So you
Metamorpho
don't
can
have,
change to elements and has a baby. And he loves his
yeah,
baby. All
that
I need to
that's all
know.
you need for
I don't
now
know
of
how he
like
got to be metamorpho, but he's got a baby, and the baby's ugly cute, like a little
you
chihuahua.
can
It's great.
trust that it's a long story. I don't even
Oh
remember the
yeah.
whole story from Elements Girl, but that's a deep cut character. He found like he scoured the D-listers, like who could I use for this movie that people don't know that well? And he pulls them in and he doesn't feel like he needs to explain, over explain, which goes back to trusting the audience. We only get a lot of explaining at certain points. Lex is like, actually, my plan is smarter and more petty than you thought it was. Haha.
But it's
Um,
literally the last scene Lex is talking in the movie, and it's the culmination of all his plans. And like you point out, he's not James Bond monologuing, prepare to die, Bond. He thinks he's won. And so he thinks there's no point in not, and he's that petty, rubbing it in Clark's face.
I mean, he might have won if he hadn't planted the seed in Clark's head that he needed to use his damn brain.
Yeah, because then he just whistles for Crypto, who takes care of it for him. Maybe he shouldn't have.
Because Crypto doesn't know the difference and he will jump on people that he likes and also to people he doesn't like.
Yeah, and
So
yeah,
everyone.
yes. Which Supergirl thinks is hilarious. Also, when Supergirl shows up for literally a 5-minute cameo at best, it contextualizes for us real fast. She's a hot mess. She drinks a lot. She goes to planets with red suns so she can metabolize and get drunk. And you realize that Crypto's her dog, and that's why he's a mess and he just jumps on everything because she thinks it's funny. And also in the back of your mind, I was like, oh, it's a good thing that dog lived because I don't know if it pissed off Kryptonian is a good thing to have when she's drunk on Earth either. But also, you just get all
Yeah.
that information about she's a hot mess. Clearly, she's not survived the trauma of losing her entire civilization well. Crypto's a mess and a badly behaved dog because of her. And Clark loves Crypto and he takes care of him and he loves his cousin, but you can tell just from his sort of side look to Ford and his few comments to Ford the robot that it's exhausting and he loves her, but it's exhausting. And that's all you need to know. And she'll have her own movie soon. That's it. She doesn't even say much except, hey, I'm back. I don't remember if she says anything of substance beyond that except to
It says,
roll
"Where's my
around with
dog?"
Crypto. Where's my
Yeah.
dog? That's it. That's it, man. That's it. There's no
The
like
funny thing
confidential,
about
like,
that, you
did you
said
know about my
recontext.
parents? Why didn't you tell me about the message? There's none of that. She's just like rolling around with her dog, and that's it. That's the whole thing. And then she's out. Sorry.
Oh, I was saying you were talking about how recontextualizing. The one line that every time that I was in the theater, the gotta laugh is like when he's going to give himself up to the police because he thinks that'll help him get a lead on Crypto. And Lois is like, it's a dog. And he's like, yeah. And he's not even a very good dog, but he's alone and he's probably sad. So the part where he's not a very good dog, everyone laughs at that. It's not even his dog, but he
Yeah.
loves the dog. That's how much he cares. And it's so funny that of course it's her dog. Of course it's her dog.
It makes so
Um,
much sense once you see it. You're like, oh, lightning bolt moment. If
But there's so much
anything,
character with all of them. Like even
yeah,
characters that you think are supposed to be funny or just like one thing, they're not one thing. There's more to them and you feel like they walked out of their own story into this one. And
they
that's
feel
really like
fully
what you want.
realized. Yeah.
So
Because
like
I think,
for
yeah.
example, Eve.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk about
She's
Eve?
yeah, totally. She's the MVP of this movie. I know that sounds odd, but she is basically the mold that everybody from the Daily Planet team needs to get incriminating pictures of contracts and documents and maps to nail Lex Luthor's butt to the wall, get it on national media, have the public sentiment turn, and get him locked in Belle Reve and dispowered, essentially. Not dispowered literally, but no money, no connections in jail, the worst thing that can happen to a billionaire, basically, which is how you know this is a fictional film. But we all need it somewhere, guys. But the point is, Eve starts, and the first thing you see of Eve is like the opening part where after Superman's better, he comes back to battle Ultraman, essentially. And she's taking selfies. She's just standing in the window at Luthor Court taking selfies in her cute little outfit. And you're like, oh, she's Eve Tessmacher. Of course, she's that kind of girl. She's an influencer. You roll your eyes and you go, of course. But her selfies and shots are things that slip under Lex's nose because he thinks the same thing. It's just for her gram, her Insta cred. He doesn't care. But what she's been doing because she knows he's put his past girlfriends who knew too much in the pocket Gitmo dimension. She could be next. She's scared. She doesn't know how to leave him because he's Lex and he'll just throw her in the pocket dimension for leaving him. So she has to make an exit plan. And so her exit plan at some point has been I'm going to make it look like I'm taking stupid selfies, but they're all maps and plans and contracts with Boravia that are my insurance policy. And because she's dating Jimmy, Jimmy has Riz. It is what it is. He's real cool and he can get any girl in Metropolis before Clark could, maybe even before Lex could, honestly. He's had a fling with Eve or he dated her once and he doesn't like her, but she becomes his source. And because Eve has it, she does it. And there's actually moments for her, not where she's just used as a source or comic relief, but as things don't go as well for Lex once he realizes Clark's gotten himself out of the pocket dimension, he gets real violent. He starts throwing things at his employees. He starts throwing mugs and basing them, saying, you all have to get on your hands and knees and pick it up. I think he throws pencils at Eve. It's threatening. It's clear that he could easily escalate to punching her or hitting her or throwing something heavy at her. And that's when she locks herself in a bathroom and makes the conscious decision to be the full out stool pigeon for Jimmy. But so she has a real character moment of, again, a real life threat of, this man is violent. This man could easily turn physically violent to her if he hasn't in the past. And it motivates her to take that last step to get her exit plan enacted and help the Daily Planet. So you start thinking she's a big old ha ha social influencer joke. We've seen it a million times. And she's literally, without her, getting Lex Luthor in jail would not happen.
Yeah, she's one of his blind spots. He has several, but that's
Yeah.
one of the big ones is that he doesn't think that highly of the women that he keeps on his arm for his ego. So that's unfortunate for him because that's what really brings him down. It shows us who he is. Well, not us, it shows the rest of the world. And for him, what the rest of the world thinks matters so much. It's why he
Yeah.
spent so much time and
Being
effort
mad at
at
Superman
monkeys
too.
in
Monkey.
turning public opinion against Superman.
He wants to be the most loved, and so Superman 3 years ago being the most loved, more for, I think Luthor feels like an accident of birth. Even you have powers, but I'm smart, but I had to teach myself all these things and be good at all the science stuff. He's just so mad and so petty. So of course he's not going to think anything of the influencer on his arm having enough brains to get her way out of, like, it's just
Yeah.
his own ego and need to stoke it is really his Achilles heel, is his own Greek tragic
Yeah.
flaw for sure.
But aside
We
from our love of Lex, like that, a lot of the characters get a good beat to shine. Lois is clutch. Like she's amazing. We would not be able to get Superman back if she hadn't gone to the Justice Gang and made it happen. She
Yeah,
figures out how
also
to drive a spaceship. She's
not
important. Guy
well.
rises to the occasion. Hot girl goes out and murders a dude.
Which tells us
She's
a
ready to
lot
go.
about Hot Girl. We know she's feral. We know that she is not like Clark, and she does not have a no kill code. Definitely not for dictators. Definitely not for squirrels. She's gonna drop, let's be honest, Netanyahu on the pavement and move on. And it tells us enough. We don't need a lecture. We don't even know deeper cut of comic book lore. There are different versions of Shayera the Hot Girl. Sometimes she's a part of an alien race called the Thanagarians. Sometimes she's reincarnated via some sort of Egyptian curse from ancient times. It doesn't matter here. All we know is this hot girl works for the Justice Gang. She is a college student and she'll shriek and be feral and kill a dude if she has to get the mission done. And that's all I need to know right now. And I already love her and want 8 movies with her being a feral mess. But in Guy Rising to the Occasion, we know enough to know he has a vow. He's probably not the top tier or even the third tier lantern you call, but he's inspired enough by Clark doing right and getting the request from Clark to help in Jar Hampur when he can't because he's got to save Metropolis, to show up and stop a genocide and do it with flipping off the middle fingers. Talk about a fight scene. His version of fighting with the lantern ring is making giant middle fingers that erupt from the ground and overturn tanks. And you're like, yeah, that feels like something Guy Gardner would do. It's automatically also characterizing. And then you mentioned, I think, and I feel like you want to do justice by Clark's parents, how they are and how they feel authentic to being the good country people they are.
Yeah, I've seen okay, so if you hate this movie and you hate his parents specifically because you think that they're just hicks, you are showing what an elitist asshole you are. Like if you're
Ben
from one of
Shapiro.
those areas, they're just good country people. They're people that you would see hanging around and you know that they're good people. That Clark learned these lessons to help other people from them. And
Yeah,
it shows in how they parent him, it shows in how they care, and how his dad gets a little emotional. And my dad does the same thing about
he's a
us. Of
mush.
like
Yeah.
he's not emotional any other time, but he starts talking about us and he says, "You guys are my only reward in this life," and it's so sweet. And so, if you look down on those people, screw you. They're just such good characters, and they only have a few moments. And their opening is so funny because anyone who has an elderly parent trying to interact with technology is
It's
it's
so
funny to
true
scream
though.
about.
It's
Oh,
so, it's not that they're dumb, it's just that you have a parent in their 60s or 70s, you're like, I don't know, touch the button. Nope, still touch
but
the button.
then,
It's real cute.
but then she's like, "I got your boots clean. Go and save those people," and
She
it's
helps.
adorable.
And I also want to say that Midnight knows from what she speaks because she is from an Appalachia area, so she knows
Yeah.
people that
I'm
she
from
grew
East
up country.
Tennessee. I lived in Oklahoma. I lived in Texas. So that there are definitely jerks everywhere, but there are also people who are, they're just country and it's fine.
And my
And that doesn't mean
family
that they're
is from
stupid
North
or
Carolina,
ugly. And
so
if you think that they're stupid and ugly because they're poor and rural, then you're ugly. So
well, they're not even that poor. They own a functional ranch with
yeah, they own a
cows, which is
farm.
expensive to
Like
keep running.
my family didn't own a farm. So
Yeah. And I think the one thing I want to do as we head into the final section of this is, because I made you because I'm a mean wife, watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. We're not going to go into deep exposition on that because we could be here forever and it sucks. It sucks. Joss Whedon's version sucks. Joss Whedon's a terrible human, and Zack Snyder's version sucks. It sucks. The only thing going for Joss Whedon's version is it's only 2 hours long, so at least it's done sooner and there's a lot less exposition. But I'm bringing that up because, in contrast, Gunn knows how to do character moments with real obscure characters that most of us have not heard of before and do it in a way that serves the character, that's about that present moment and their personality, and you like them and you're like, if I see him again, that's cool. If I don't see him again, I don't feel like I wasted 6 minutes on a setup for another film that may not even happen. Great. It serves overall the plot of the film and saving Jarhanpur or whatever with the Justice Gang over there. Great. It shows that they were inspired by Clark and all his hope. Awesome. Because hope is the theme of the movie and hope punk is the ideal. With the Justice League that Zack Snyder made, the 4 hour cut, it is none of these things. And I feel like we were talking about how if you started the film, this is how my universe is different. You'd get those like 25, 30 minutes of montages of ancient Egypt to mournful Inya music, and then you'd finally maybe get to the plot. We sat there and it took an hour and 15 minutes of the Snyder cut to get to the plot. That was a problem. But I'm saying that the biggest problem is the characters with each other because he's trying to set up the league or make you care about the league or whatever. And I know that they're both hemmed in, either the Whedon version or the Snyder version, by the fact that DC just wanted to catch up with Marvel and really needed a couple extra
Yeah.
movies to do it and wouldn't
I mean, I
invest in
would
it.
say in defense of Snyder, and this was the only time I ever do, is that Gunn is actually in charge.
Yeah,
So he is able to have the broader scope of what they're trying to do and set down the plan, which Snyder doesn't get to do. He has
which
something
is
that he
totally
clearly
fair.
wants to do, but he doesn't get to do that. So he's going to spend a lot of time doing something instead.
No matter who makes this movie that the Justice League was, because they aren't actually introducing Aquaman, Cyborg, or the Flash till that movie, it's gonna be an exposition dump because you didn't do each person's movie. Like, you tried to cheat code it. But if you take that problem where it's really three movies in one because you didn't build a ramp into it, plus the fact that Zack Snyder really loves to talk in exposition anyway. All the character interactions are exposition, and they're not doing double duty. They're just info dumping at you about the mother boxes. It's a mess. But
They're
it's
info dumping
worse.
to
Yeah.
people in their life about things that are happening in their life. When the Flash tells his father that his father is in prison, he should say, "Yes, I know, son. I don't have Alzheimer's."
Sitting right here behind the literal plexiglass in prison with the little phone so I can talk. You know what I mean? Literally, like literally in the prison.
Just too much explanation of things. You have to be really careful with exposition. And there's so much you can show visually. It's a visual medium. You can show us some of this stuff and not have to talk about it. One of the problems is that they were trying to rush things, and we came up with 3 or 4 different versions of how they could have rolled this out, like having the characters connect to each other with characters that people had succeeded with. But you can't travel back in time and make them slow down and actually build the universe, or go back in time and not give it to Zack Snyder to begin with and actually make a Superman movie instead of, let's be real, his version is a Justice Lord from the beginning. He is eventually going to become the Justice Lord because eventually Lois is going to die and he doesn't care about people. So
No.
nothing's going to stop him from becoming a tyrant. He doesn't have to have his dad on the lowdown be kind of a weird freak telling him that he needs to breed with a bunch of women and become a dictator. He's going to do it anyway.
And I think this is my one point, and I have to keep saying this because screw Joss Whedon. He's a terrible human. We've established he's a racist and misogynist. He sucks. He sucks. And the theatrical cut of the Justice League is not a good movie. It sucks. And some of the humor choices are dumb. But the only time that at least Arthur Aquaman actually feels like himself, because Aquaman, I'd forgotten this, releases after Justice League does, but I had seen it first because I didn't get around to self torture Justice League till it was COVID and I had free time and whatever. He's funny. He's gruff but charming. He's got all that charisma that we love Jason Momoa for, and it's there in his own movie that comes out like a year after the Justice League. And the only version of which you see him being that dude is in a few quips, which is there is a funny scene where he accidentally sits on Wendy's truth lasso in Whedon's film, and he's acting like he's supposed to, and he matches the version that James Wan presented in Aquaman. And that is, you're right. Gunn has the luxury and the power because he is the guy setting this all out to know what's going to happen and to agree to it and know what's going to be in place. He's the Kevin Feige now, and they need one unifying guy, and they didn't have it. All that said, at least once in a while, even if the humor doesn't land or sometimes I don't agree with it, the Justice League interact as sometimes people who are beginning to be co-workers and have rapport with each other, dumb or not, in Whedon's version. Like the little line that I thought was funny about when Bruce first recruits Barry and he gets in Bruce's car and he's like, "What's your power?" He's like, "I'm really rich." It's funny, but we've seen how important being really rich. Look at Lex almost tears a hole in reality through a black hole because he's that rich and can fund his research. A rich dude with a lot of free time and obsession is the most dangerous thing in the DC universe, even if they're humans. Clearly, it's funny, but in Snyderverse, they just exposition at each other. Then they exposition at each other more. So they're not even interacting even as burgeoning coworkers or a team or humans. I know they're not all human necessarily, but they don't act like people. They don't talk. And there is technically a proto Justice League in Superman 2025 with the Justice Gang, including Metamorpho joining in at the end. And we get little dribs and drabs, like we said, of who these people are by their characterization or a comment they make or how they act. But I don't need Guy Gardner to sit down and be like, "Well, I found this alien and he gave me this ring and I was always kind of a dick, but like at least now I have power and Maxwell Lord offered me to be part of this gang and I like it and I like my haircut and it's cool." We get enough of him to know who he's doing. We get enough to know that he loves his haircut because Lois insults it because we're all thinking it because it's comics accurate. But we're here now, and he loves that stupid haircut, which is a funnier beat than it has a
I
right to
think to
be.
be fair, Nathan Fillion is into the haircut. He thinks it's funny.
It is
So
funny.
let him have his Guy Gardner haircut.
Yeah. And again, I don't need Shire to be like, "Well, actually, I'm not a fan of Thanagarian. I'm blah, 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 and I'm looking for my life." Like, I don't need that in this movie. But if you had had Zack Snyder's Superman 2025, it would just be the scene where Lois goes to get someone to help her from the Justice Gang, be 35 minutes long, and you would have had a 10-minute monologue for Mr. Terrific being like, "Well, I always liked electronics, and then I went to get a PhD, and then I did," and you'd be like, "Okay, Clark's dead now." You know what I mean? It would
So,
just be
yeah,
that.
so we need to wrap this up, but I want to
Yeah, totally.
piggyback on that to something that I say all the time is that with exposition and even with character backstories, because we're not all Mike Flanagan, the way you get a license to give a monologue is tease them with not knowing,
For a
make
long
them
time.
want to know, and when you finally give the payoff, then they're hungry for it.
It
So
should
the
be like
harder
Hansel
you
and
tease it,
Gretel.
yeah, as it should be, give them little breadcrumbs of like, why are they doing this? Why is she like this? What's happening?
You have
And
to earn it.
so
Yeah.
yeah, you have to earn it. And I would tie that back in with why Lois is awesome is that she doesn't go up and tell us, I am a good reporter, by the way. I got a Pulitzer Prize and I did this and I did that. And also I'm in love with Superman. She doesn't have to tell us that. We see her character ragging on Clark for having bad journalistic ethics. We see it. We don't have to hear it. But then we get her to say a little bit about what she's like because we already had the scene where she's frustrated with the relationship and the later part explains that.
Ironically, the part where she's trying to info dump about her, because they've only been dating for 3 months, her newest relationship with Superman is she's trying to offload on their ride with Mr. Terrific in his like ship, and he's like, "I don't care." He shuts her
You're
down. She's
right.
like, I was just thinking out loud.
We might want to know, but then
So
no,
it's
he doesn't
almost a little
care.
bit of a lampshade where Gunn's getting away with a little bit of her expounding on her relationship and her inner feelings, but it does double duty or triple duty really as being a comic relief beat that gives you a little bit of catharsis because you laugh at Terrific's reaction, but then you know more about Mr. Terrific and what he's willing to do or say or how close he's willing to get to coworkers or people on the same mission. And he doesn't care. He's here for the mission. He's here to stop Lex's bad science. And he doesn't give a shit what's happening with your boyfriend, Lois. And it's a really good
Yeah,
beat, but yeah, you
that's
can't just have
good. It's
people
funny.
monologue their backstories to each other. And the temptation to info dump is really hard, which is why I also go back to the title card. Like I said, I'm sure it took Gunn 15 or 20 iterations to get that opening correct and get it parsimonious and get it down and efficient. That doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen 3 or 4 drafts in. So if you feel like, gosh, I need to get all this world building information or character information in the first 50 pages, it's not working, that's probably because you're on your first or second draft and you're going to need more to figure it out how to scaffold it,
Yeah.
what really has to pay off later and what can be cut and what can be turned into breadcrumbs to have that payoff in the last third of the book, like it's the last third of this movie.
When I'm
That's the
drafting,
temptation.
I do have notes that I give to myself as I go. If I put in something that's kind of an info dump, but I think that I might be able to see it later, I might highlight it and leave it there for the moment and then make a load of lessen this and then explain more later. So you can, as you draft, note that this is a little too much for this part of the scene, or you might make a note of I need a little bit more description here, come back to it when you have the world fleshed out a little bit more. And leave notes for yourself because you're going to do more than one draft if you want this to be a good book.
Yeah, I will say I'm in the middle of a revision process. It's been delayed a bit because my life is a mess. But I reread the book. I printed the book out, by the way. Like I printed it in a binder so I could read it like a reader would read it and read it on physical paper. Also, because it keeps you from not concentrating on other stuff. Like you just sit and you read it for 5 hours, like I were sitting and I had bought it at a bookshop. I go through it, and as I go through it, I make notes and be like, well, this doesn't make sense, or this comes back here, or you should see it here because in the third act, this is a thing, but it's not in the first act. And then when I was done, I made a detailed outline. I always make an outline to write from. That's my brain. But in that original outline, I added in red scenes or chapters that had to either be added or altered to make sure the character beat and character arcs and the plot made sense. And sometimes they're coded like this will work if I want the payoff for this character later, or to understand this character's motivations better, or to see the side of him interacting with his daughter earlier to get the buy-in. But I have to know. So I make those same notes of this doesn't pay off yet. How do I fix it? Okay, now that I'm going back for a second full pass, these are the things I'm aware of that have to be switched up or seated earlier or have to be redone to make the character more likable, yada, yada. But yeah, none of this happens overnight. None of what Gunn created happens overnight. A draft is going to take 3 or 4 drafts before you get that rhythm at minimum. And I say this also as an editor who I worked as a subcontractor for a place once where I got a lot of drafts that were honestly clearly first drafts. Maybe, and sometimes not even then, they had been polished for grammar and typos, but I knew that they were first drafts because things would happen and you got that they knew who the character was much better by the final third, or you got big plot revelations that make some sense, but maybe it was only the real thing setting it up was a passing mention or 250 pages back, and the writer realized it was important as they were going. And you can see where the draft could go if they'd had 3 or 4 more iterations for getting it to the developmental editor. But at this point, you're like, oh, this is a draft that you literally finished but didn't revise for content level stuff. And so you realize you've got honestly a back half that doesn't truly match the front half because all the development and them realizing really more about their world and characters and plot didn't happen till the downhill. And so they didn't go
Yeah.
back and make sure the front matched the back and added that, like we keep saying, planting and payoff. And that only comes, I don't care if you're James Gunn, I don't care if you're Ryan Coogler, I don't care if you're a Nobel Prize winning author. It doesn't happen in the first or second draft. It's really refining and like sculpting with marble what you're trying to create and building that synergy of planning and payoff. And it's going to take multiple
Yeah.
drafts. And I'm begging you, as a developmental editor, don't just do, I did a draft, I got one thing of beta or 2 beta feedbacks, I did a second draft and made sure I typo checked it. I'm sending it to my developmental editor. Save yourself money and to get the most out of your developmental editor, please do not submit to your developmental editor at least until you've done 3 passes at a content level after some
Yeah.
feedback from a trusted critique partner or beta reader. And then by the third pass, you've also made sure it's clean of typos as much as you can do. We're here to help with grammar or point things out or be like, oh, that's not how that's actually spelled, because there are words even I think are spelled away and they're not.
Well, I was going to say from a practical point, most of your editors are going to be charging by the word. So it does
Yes.
benefit you to look at it a few times, get the amount that you need there in world building, because that takes up words and deal with that. I would also add that it's not uncommon for you to write your way into understanding your world better. As writing your world building should be a recursive process between character and world and plot and world. And so you're not going to have the world all planned and ready to go before you start writing, because then you'll never start writing. But
Mhm.
your character should inform your world and your world should inform how your characters behave. So as you develop the world and the plot and the characters, you will have things that you want to go back and say, okay, well, I want to, as you said, seed it a little bit earlier. Or this would be a good moment to just describe that because I didn't know what they were going to be looking at there. But now I do. So, okay, go back and describe it a little bit. So you have multiple
Yeah.
ways of doing that. And it's not just someone sitting there and telling you things.
So I think James Gunn's Superman 2025 is a masterpiece. I think it's one of the best 5 comic movies I've seen, and definitely the best one in years. But I want to point out the reason it works so well for a comic book movie, because they've become so bloated, does it in 2 hours, which is fairly brisk for all the stuff it has to do, even with a big cast. Because going in, I was like, we've got lanterns, we've got hot girl, we've got blah,
Yeah,
blah,
that
blah.
was
We've
the
got a lot.
worry.
I was worried, like, how can we do all these things? And sometimes it feels frenetic. I know some people said that the turn of the message got revealed. Now everybody's mad at Superman, and within a day he's in Gitmo. That feels a little fast. I get that. That's a legit criticism. But for so many moving pieces, it works so well. And my thesis is that I think it works so well, not just because James Gunn is a talented writer, but because I am sure there were many, many, many drafts of this. And
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it was such a flagship for relaunching something, it was thought over very, very tightly. And I'm just saying you can't do something this tightly done that has this much resonance and this much planning and payoff without multiple, multiple drafts and feedback, and treating this as a process, not a I made it in goal in 2 drafts. Please, it makes your editors happier if you don't do it that way, I promise. And it makes your book better if you see
Well,
this as a
it'll cost you less money.
to steal from a previous Lex, see this as a journey and not a light switch to your draft. Paraphrase a bit. Anyway, thank you for sitting with me midnight. Thank you for the patience of a longer than usual podcast, but I think there's just a lot to cover with something that illustrates some of the things we keep seeing that are problems in drafts, especially this. My first half doesn't match my back half because I didn't do enough revisions before I sent it to my editor problem. But also, I just want to end on that message of like a really good, strong, tight story isn't built in 1 or 2 drafts. So give yourself the patience and the time and the permission to revise and realize that it is a process. So until then, we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks, and we'll have some news at that point on some festivals and some things going on, at least in our local area that we're covering. And have a good couple weeks, guys. Thank you for joining the Otherlands Editing Podcast. Look for our next episode coming soon, and in the interim, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want more information or want to connect, you can find Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss at our site, Otherlands Editing. Until next time, keep writing and keep refining your words.